can send a message in the chat just to say your name and your location, just because we wanted to see how global are we going to be today and how global we are today for this event. That would be nice. Okay, I can see some messages arriving. That's very nice. Like one. Costanza. Yeah, we are starting to look a very active chat, and this is very nice. So in a couple of minutes, I will welcome officially everyone. Hello, everyone. Hi, Maria, David. Let's do a quick check. Can you all see the screen clearly? Can you all hear me clearly? Just send a sign. Yes. Okay. Let me see how many attendees we have. I think we can start, and then people will only miss me saying, welcome everyone. Welcome to this special event that we organized today. I am Marco Distinto. I will be hosting the session together with Divya, Jyoti, and also Munib, and Vic, which they are in the background. Oh no, they are showing the face, which are in the background, and they are checking that they are our technology angels in the background, ensuring that everything runs smoothly. So, okay, just a couple of things before, just a bit of information in terms of housekeeping. We have a chat that you can use to post. Apart from introducing yourself, you can also use the chat to send us any comments, any discussion, any question when we start the discussion. Apologies. And we are not using a Q&A, we're only using the chat, so please use it in a way that makes everything easy for us to manage. So please feel free to share your comments and chat over there. Diva will have a look at that, and we'll then be using your question to pose to the panelists. And we also have, let me move the slides if I can manage to do that. Okay. Can you see the QR code? Okay, so we are also using a Padlet today. I think, Divya, if you can share the link again, because it probably got lost. We have a Padlet that we can use in parallel to the chat. So if you have any idea that you want to share using the Padlet, please be creative. You can post a picture, you can post comments or questions there. And if you want to do that without using the chat, it would be great. It's also a great way for us to collect some information about your impression and your feedbacks for this event. And so apart from these, it would be great if you can stay with us until the end, because we are going to share a couple of, we have a few announcements, a couple of interesting news that we want to share with you at the end of this session. And also another thing that I wanted to remind you is that this session is going to be recorded, and that will be posted online on our YouTube channel, where you can see also the previous event organized by CMS InTouch. First of all, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for registering to attend this event. I'm very happy to have organized this event with our CMS InTouch team, because I think that this is a special event. And we organized this event for two main reasons. The first one, of course, being this the 5th year of activities of CMS InTouch, I think it was a great opportunity to celebrate the work made by this group in keeping the CMS community connected, starting from the pandemic until now. And then the second reason why we think that this was an interesting event, we consider this to be a special event, is because we saw this as a valuable opportunity to come together and dedicate some of our time to reflect and discuss on how we can organize the CMS community differently, and why we need to do that in this particular period of time in our history that is marked by violence, is marked by division and inequality. So the thing that we wanted to discuss today is, what can we do? What are the opportunities and possibilities for democratic academic organizing when these forces continues to shape our institution and our everyday practices in academia. I think I've already been speaking for too long, and I think it's starting to get boring from my side. And I'm very happy now to introduce our great panel that we are very happy to have with us, and I'm thanking you for joining us, for accepting our invitation. So today we are joined by, let's go back to the panel. So we are joined by Devi Vijay from the Indian Institute of Management. Then we are joined by Nick Butler from the Stockholm University, and then Elise Lobbe, that's from Neoma Business School. Then we are joined by two of the founding members of CMS InTouch. Also, I forgot to say something. Devi is also one of the founders of PCI Organization Studies, and Nick and Elise are joining us also as part of the Ephemera Collective. And then Alex Bristow from the Open University, and Ozan from Utrecht, Ozan Alakavuklar, so apologies for my mistakes, and from the Utrecht University as founders also of CMS InTouch. So without further ado, I think I've taken too much time. I'm happy to stop sharing the screen. And Devi, if you are happy to start your presentation. Before I forgot, every panelist has 10 minutes. We will be hearing from all of them, and then we will open up the conversation for a discussion altogether. If that's okay. Devi, are you happy to start?
Are my slides visible?
Yes, I can see everything perfectly. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
And now the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Marco, so much. Thank you also to the CMS InTouch team. I know that there's been a lot of coordination going on for over a month. Am I audible clearly? Is my audio okay? All right, great. So thanks again. This is always so much of a coordination behind scenes, and I really appreciate that. So all the work that's been going in. Sorry, just getting back to my slides. Mm-hmm. Give me a minute, please. Should I? I think we should be fine. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about some of our experiments with creating knowledge commons, but I'd like to situate this in the backdrop of, and I'm sure for the CMS community, this is this is familiar territory. I'm not going to be saying anything new, but it's really that I'd like to situate the way we've been thinking about the need for these knowledge commons. I'm going to briefly mention the Subgroup Collaborative, which we've been working on, and then really spend more time on the peer community and organization studies that we co-founded a couple of years ago. So I'm only a co-founder of this, of the peer community and organization studies. So, we've really been thinking with ruination and debris for the last couple of years. It's human and non-human debris from imperial wars and occupations, wastelands and waste seas, And in our thinking, it's firmly located in capitalist processes that devour human lives, democracy, and nature in its relentless drive for profits. This is not new. People have been saying this for decades, but also more, potently, more, it's been exposed in the last couple of years with the genocide in Palestine, with the rise of fascist tendencies across the world, newer forms of occupation, most recently with the US warmongering in Venezuela. So I think these are the times we're living in, and it's important to locate the politics of corporations in it. Again, points that have been raised repeatedly by scholars in the CMS community as well. And just to underscore here, the report of the UN rapporteur last year on the politics of corporations in the genocide. Now, in all of this, for me, and to tie this to today's conversation, it is a firm betrayal by academia. I mean, I'm not trying to make a rhetorical point here. I think it's exposed. Again, these the foundations, the infrastructures of this have been long in making. The forms of elite infrastructures we've created in the form of universities. But what we've seen in the last few years has only exposed the fact that career furthering research, our convenient silences, ellipses, erasures, and equivocations around what constitutes a genocide, what is fascism, the refusal to call something fascism is all, we're complicit in that. And it's a question I leave, for me, it's, this is where I situate myself. I leave it as an open question to you in terms of how complicit are we in critical management studies in this discourse. Of course, the role of oligarchic publishing houses is very intertwined with the mechanisms that we see around us. They restrict access to public supported, public funded knowledge in crucial domains such as public health, medical science, your climate crisis, and so on. Right? Of course, all of this is compounded in the Global South. Again, I know I'm repeating this for the CMS community, but given the space, I'd like to underscore the fact that even today, for example, Org Science has come out with a call for papers on the Global South. These are all field sites that are exotic for the to study, but quite lopsidedly, journal editorial board members, reviewers remain in the Western Hemisphere. And this published research on the Global South remains behind paywalls. And of course, we're familiar with the question of sanctioned ignorance. Regional knowledge is rarely referenced, rarely cited. Authors, they may be field agents, they may be field assistants, etc., but never represented in terms of authorship. And again, as I mentioned, these are concerns when we are conceptualizing questions today, such as ethnic conflict, climate crisis, and so on. Now, as I began, is critical management studies complicit? Yes, because for me, because we end up creating weak, elite knowledge about the world around us. This is not just about tokenistic inclusion of the Global South, but when we're thinking about climate crisis, when we're thinking about public health, if we are just producing knowledge based on tiny islands in the global north, we're inevitably, that's shaky knowledge. That's knowledge that doesn't hold up for the people. As research communities where there's a loss of control over production, dissemination, circulation in these forms of paywalled knowledge that we produce. And this is not the knowledge of and for the people. And even so, we worked on a review of alternative organizing literature last year. And even in this space, when people are trying to imagine another world, we find it so curious that people continue to reference alternative organizing in the UK or in France without ever thinking about how people in the Global South have been thinking about this for decades when we've been confronting the IMF and the World Bank and so on in their looting and profiteering. So what then do we do? Right? How do we move from enclosure to commons? And this is something that we've been thinking of for the last few years, more recently. So we do need alternative infrastructures. The ones that we have do not serve the people. And at the same time, what we must, and I'm not saying that it's all, it's all ruination, it's all debris, or even if it is, I think there's possibilities of building from that debris. What can we salvage? What can we possibly repair and patch from the debris is something for us to think about, because after all, fascist and right-wing authoritarian tendencies do clamp down on critical studies. We've seen that across the world, where critical studies departments are being defunded and shut down. There's, of course, the corporatization of media, killing and incarceration of journalists. So this thought control is important part of this violence that we see. And so what then do we do? So it's in this spirit that we've been, at least in India, this is something which is very focused on India. We'd love to make it more South Asia. So, my friends and I have been working on the Sabra collaborative. Sabra is patience in Urdu, in Arabic, in Persian. And what we mean by Sabra is, in many ways, Sabra seems, given the urgency of the phenomenon that we confront, it seems a little kind of curious to talk about patience, but we think it's important in a stage of insta everything, right? Instagram, insta work, insta everything, insta deliveries. In India, at least, you're seeing 10-minute delivery apps, and people have been protesting, rightly so, the workers. So I think we're drawing from that idea of how people persist in these conditions, cope and persevere through this patience of building another world, building other infrastructures for another world. So this one is really focused on healthcare, domestic work, elder care, and really trying to create interdisciplinary knowledge communities. I will share the link. Do look us up. Do tell us how we can make this more meaningful, where we're talking about healthcare, domestic work, and elder care primarily right now. And we hope to talk about more realms of care through the arts, through other forms that bridge not just organization studies, but also medical anthropology and sociology and so on. I'm going to spend the rest of the time that I have on the peer community in organization studies, which Eloise Berkowitz and I co-founded. It's really her baby, and then I kind of joined along at some point of time and said, let's do this together. So peer community is a larger umbrella of knowledge, of researchers, really founded in the, in ecology, evolution. These were some of the earlier PCIs. And we're the first one in the social sciences, if you may. So PCI Org Studies is the first one in this realm. So it is a peer review and recommendation of preprints. So now, of course, many of us will be familiar with ArchiveX, HAL, and SOC ArchiveX, OSF, etc. But these are preprint platforms. All of us can upload our preprints there. But what PCI does is peer-reviewed preprints. And the idea is that we peer review and put it out there so it's available, it's citable, it has a DOI, so it's citable. And then, of course, after that, you can either continue to submit it to a journal, leave it out there on the platform itself where it's citable, or more recently, there's an option of submitting it to PCI Journal, given that we see a lot of early career researchers still face the pressures of needing a journal publication. So, but this is really the broader umbrella. It's a very democratic community that meets every month, thus far on Thursdays. And this is actually pushed by the the open science kind of imperative in several parts of Northern Europe. Primarily, a lot of the founding members are from France. The idea being that when it's publicly funded research, the knowledge has to be publicly available and cited. So given that kind of a systemic push, PCI has gained a lot of traction in some of these spaces. I'm happy to talk about some of the challenges we've seen in talking about PCI in the Global South. Now, of course, what does it do? How is it different from the existing knowledge infrastructures that we have? It's open in the sense that it's not a blind peer review. We started off with a blind peer review, given the in our kind of indoctrination in the org studies field, but we've kind of moved away from that to open science peer review, which is very much consistent with the other PCIs. We also hope that this reduces time to publish topical important ideas and doesn't have to kind of languish in the journal process, right? Here, of course, the focus being on articles rather than the journal brand, that I'm not publishing in a particular ranked, cited sort of, what indexed journal, but this is more about the article itself. We already, at the time of launch itself, we had over 50 recommenders and reviewers. So it kind of shifts from that gatekeeping paradigm of journals, which have about 12 predominantly global north editors and reviewers, right? So we had to be geographically diverse to reflect more situated knowledge production. It is pluridisciplinary, so our recommenders and reviewers are already from different fields and not just organization studies, but our articles are the articles that we've been looking at as preprints are looking at the question of organization from these different disciplinary vantage points. For the Global South, it gives us an opportunity to kind of avoid this whole mediation through the Global North, that if I need to have a conversation with another geography if I want to have South-South conversations, it doesn't necessarily have to be mediated via the Global North. Now, this is not a competition to journals. Rather, we think about it as crowding in the sense that we're bringing in more people who are in this conversation about organizing and organizations, but not necessarily from the discipline as we've been as journals and conferences kind of reify and enforce, right? So why we think that this matters for this conversation on organizing differently, again, as I started out with, it reclaims the question of production, circulation, dissemination of knowledge, which no longer this is completely open sourced, open access. The code is also written within the PCI community. You can check out the website of PCI. So this is all in-house in terms of how the website is created, and there are changes to the portal based on communities' inputs. So it's really an experiment for us. So even in our last meeting in December, when it was a smaller governance meeting, Fabio, I'm going to quote him here, Fabio Myra was reminding us that it's an experiment, right? We need to think about ourselves as also experimenting with something. And it reorganizes how we decide what knowledge counts, right? Because it's not no longer journal ranked, but we're really trying to use recommenders to suggest that this is an important article that people must read. We think it aligns with CMS in terms of epistemic plurality, epistemic justice, but also, just more number of people in the conversation, more people with access to this work. Just to give you a sense of how this looks, these are some of our recent publications. So recommendations. So they are global north-south science inequalities due to language and funding barriers, rhizomatic approach of collaboration among organizations. This is Eloise and Sunny. So, these recommendations are out there. So you can click on, so Helena has recommended this article as the editor. The recommender here is equivalent to the editor. And Elena's recommendation of this article is also available. So in some sense, there's also transparency in the editorial decision-making process as to why this particular article is recommended by this team of reviewers. And of course, it can eventually be published in the peer community journal if they don't want to take it anywhere else. Now, of course, we've had challenges because our ranking and all your evaluation metrics are so deeply entrenched in universities. So we do encourage you to be part of the community, of course, join as reviewers, recommenders, contribute papers. If you have ideas for a thematic that you'd really like to see out soon, for example, about war, about polarization, about hatred, stuff that you think may be difficult to find spaces in journals or may take years in the journal cycle, do get in touch with us. We'd love to have more conversations. And of course, most importantly, if you can, even in your own institutions, if you're part of promotion panels, at least take the consideration of bibliodiversity, that we're not just looking at ranked journals, but this diverse set of knowledge output that people produce in the public interest. Then maybe you could, given this idea of PCI, you could also change the discourse a little bit. If you're part of the editorial board of journals, then do consider becoming PCI friendly. And there's so much that one needs to unpack about PCI. So if you'd really like to know more, or you have a research group you'd like us to talk to, we'd be happy to give a longer talk which walks you through the process in more detail. But I'm going to stop with that, and just with the reminder that this is that old English poem of the goose and the common. and how we just have to be a little irreverent and indisciplined in these times and stealing the commons back, right, for the goose. All right. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. We will be back when we have a conversation and discussion at the end. Now, Nick and Elise, please feel free to share your screen. And yes, this is your time.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for the invitation to come and speak to you on behalf of Ephemera. So I'm gonna kick us off, and then Elise will conclude the presentation. And basically, we're going to be talking about what ephemera is, what it values, how it's organized, and some of the main both opportunities, but also some of the challenges we face as a journal, and I would say more importantly, as a community, as a group of people who are trying to do things differently and help others do things differently in academia as well. All right. So to give you some context, I'd like to kind of briefly describe what ephemera is. I know that many of you will be familiar with ephemera, but I think it's worth kind of recapping just to kind of contextualize a lot of the things that we're going to go on to say. So probably the most important thing to say is that it's an online journal. We describe it, I think, most accurately as a diamond open access journal. That means that we publish everything free of charge. So we don't charge either readers or contributors for anything that gets published in the journal. And we like to say that we charge readers only with free thought. And we publish on the borders of organization studies. So we like to think of ourselves as encouraging work that lies very much at the margins of the discipline. Now, that means that it's a space where we intersect with other disciplines frequently, but also kind of problematizing some of the ways in which organization studies itself has become solidified as a field of knowledge, a body of knowledge. So we're quite a dinosaur in terms of age. So we were actually founded 25 years ago, which is quite remarkable that we still are just about hanging on and surviving, maybe even thriving in some ways. We currently publish 3 issues a year. This includes both special issues that have been curated by members of the collective, usually in collaboration with people outside of the collective, as well as open issues where we invite contributions from people who are not part of a particular themed special issue. And, we've published almost 100 issues to date since 2001. So that's quite a backlog of knowledge that we have curated in the journal. And this gives you kind of some idea of the diverse themes that we're interested in. Some of these themes are more central to what we might think of as organization studies than others. Repair, political action, organizing for the apocalypse, Latin American struggles. We have issues on academia, on gamification, on measurement, on neoliberalism. So, we're really a heterodox journal that provides a space for different varieties of critical scholarship, both within the business school and outside of its boundaries. Just as importantly as what we publish, I think it's also worth talking about how we're organized. In other words, how we kind of put into practice those principles that we, or many of the authors that publish within Ephemera expound. So legally speaking, we are a non-profit association registered in Denmark. So that means we have a formalized mission to serve the public interests. And in our case, that's kind of the spread of knowledge and education. And we see ourselves very much as being independent from commercial publishing. We're not owned or run by any kind of commercial publishers. We have no corporate interests. We do have a Creative Commons license, but of the non-commercial variety, which means that authors are free to use and reuse their own work as they see fit, as long as it's not for a commercial purpose. So we actively position ourselves against commercialization in academia, both in our kind of theoretical interests, but also in our organizational practice. And that, I think it goes without saying that we're also entirely indifferent to journal rankings, impact factor, and all those other kind of metrics that offer a kind of poor measurement for research quality. And maybe the most important thing to know about Ephemera is that it's run entirely by an editorial collective. So it's a kind of relatively stable group that's, it's undergone many changes over the years, but it's around 15 to 20 people based in different countries, primarily based in Western Europe at present. And we organize everything ourselves. So everything from sending out editorial letters, proofreading, formatting, the layout, the web upload, that's all done entirely by the group of scholars that run the journal, completely independent of any kind of outsourcing. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Elise.
Thank you, Nick. So, it's never really easy to speak for a collective, but I'll try to share several things that we value and think of pretty often at Ephemera. And to be honest, I don't know if this is going to be the way forward or the future of CMS, but they are part of our conversation. First, we value interdisciplinary conversation. We really try to be this platform for theoretical and empirical diversity. So this is what Nick showed with the different special issue that we can promote, but it also shows in the terms of the background and the interest of the members of our editorial collective. And it's a great opportunity to learn from one another as a collective, but also in terms of the feedback that we can provide on papers, we can reach out to our network from other disciplines like sociology, geography, so on. So I think it's an added value. We also think a lot about alternative formats, and we reflect on the space we can give them in an academic journal. So, for instance, we had special issues that brings together art, sound, or video-based contributions. So this is really something that we've been thinking about and considering. And last, we really try to cultivate a culture of kindness in our academic community. So one example for that is, for instance, in the way we do peer review, our goal is really to be developmental, even if we have test rejects, but we always provide ideas and comment on how to develop the manuscript. We encourage the authors to resend their paper after working on it. And similarly, inside the collective, we make sure to develop project that aligns with the energy that we have at a given time in our group to avoid to pressure ourselves more than needed. Now, of course, there's challenges that comes with being a self-organized collective, independent from big publishers, and not playing the journal's ranking game. And I think those are challenges for anyone that tries to organize differently in academia, to be fair, and for many other self-organizing endeavor beyond academia. So most of those may not be that surprising for you guys, but of course, one of the questions for us today is how to keep going. And this resonates with what Devi said at the beginning of the conversation regarding the overall context, but also as an industry. A good friend of mine, who's also an academic, once said, we should accept that we're in a dying industry. I don't know if I would go that far, but it's true that the current conditions are not great for a lot of our colleagues. And I can only think of the UK at the moment, where a lot of people are affected by compulsory redundancies, which is something quite close for me, given that I was at the University of Essex and the people there are going through that. So, of course, how do we keep going in this environment? What does it mean in the way we operate as academic, but also as a journal? What is our role as a journal in this context? These are questions that we often ask ourselves. It's also a question that we have related to renewal, because in 2001, when the journal was launched, being a fully online journal was very innovative. Of course, it's less so today in a context where all journals are online. So we regularly wonder, should we change? If so, how and to what extent? We have this backlog of ideas. Basically, this also is a question when we think about submissions, and the issues, like how many issues should we have each year, and how do we encourage more contributions to the journal? Should we encourage more submissions, and in what form? So those are like kind of a reflexive thought that we have. And last, I'd like to finish with the question of commitment, which is also a key topic at Ephemera. How do we ensure that as a collective, but also I think as an academic community, people are able to do stuff without self-exploiting themselves is really key today. This is especially important given that we are in an industry that basically partly runs on free labor. So how do we ensure that in the way we commit to ephemera, we do not fail in the trap of activist burnout? And so we're really keen into making sure that everyone can have their personal life and trajectories taken into account. And as I was saying at the beginning, making sure that we do stuff with the energy that we're having on board at a given time. This was my concluding point, so I think I'll end up on that note.
Thank you very much, Nick and Elise. Now, Odzan.
Yes, hi everyone. I do not have a presentation, and it is also really nice to be on the other side of the CMS InTouch, to be honest, because very briefly, it was at the backdrop of COVID times, and we were looking into how we can create a space to bring colleagues together. And of course, this turned into a global platform indeed for critical scholars, broadly speaking, management and organization scholars. And it's actually great to see that it is alive, surviving, and kicking. So with this positive note, that I would like to reflect on a couple of points based on my own experiences as a part of various institutions or various institutionalized forms, and in which way how we can create spaces for some critical practices or democratic practices. And first of all, of course, it is not an easy path. But I want to begin with the idea of university as a pluralistic space. However, we all, use this neoliberal university, all these things that we do not like associated with the current economic system, associated with also the institutions that we work for. I still want to believe, maybe in a sort of naive way, given also the current status that we live through, I still want to believe that there are still possibilities. At least we have our own research. At least we have some teaching capacity. At least we have some community roles, and through these kind of possibilities, we can still create some differences. And that is where I begin with, or that's what I want to begin with. And of course, that assuming that universities are not monolithic structures, that I want to believe that there is no one size fit all. And this is something also we need to begin with. However, there is still the metrics, there is still the accreditation structures. Still we can create some spaces through our basic function. And this is also something I guess we need to keep in mind, because most of the time when we try to think about adding an extra layer in order to do something for our community, for our field, then sometimes it comes as an extra layer, and it turns out also it's not that easy. And this is also what just Elise mentioned about, we need to create spaces and places where care is essential, and how our colleagues and ourselves do not self-exploit for sustaining the community or for supporting the field. So beginning with this idea of university as a pluralistic space, however, it might be a bit difficult. I think there are still some possibilities. And along these possibilities, I think there are institutions we create. Yes, we are part of institutions, but also there are institutions we create or organizations we create. And Ephemera is definitely one of them, or Organization as a journal, one of them. ICMS conferences, one of them, even to some extent. However, it is very contested. As a former executive member, Academy of Management CMS is definitely one of them. And here, it is sometimes, of course, sitting on the table with some, very powerful opponent, and try to put some arguments and try to put some positions there, but it is, yeah, it is a kind of ongoing tension or ongoing challenge that we live with. And again, for instance, right now there are also other capacity thanks to emerging thanks to institutions that are emerging. For instance, also CMS InTouch is a perfect example because it is co-production of Academia Management CMS and Organization Journal. So my point here is that how can we expand these institutions we create? How can we institutionalize our critical work and critical initiatives so that we can create more spaces for our colleagues, for our communities? And I think the democratic principles, or the way that we want to organize society and economy, however they are also contested, is a matter of looking from this angle, that how we can expand, or scale up is a bit problematic word, or scale down, or at the bottom line, creating this kind of spaces where we can enrich the conversations, where we can create, as Devi mentioned, alternative infrastructures. I think this is really critical. In my case, for instance, I'm now involved in Turkish Academy Management CMS, and we are trying to build the community there. Or also with doesn't also have to be all the time internally, by the way. You can also, I guess there was also a reference there that how we can build also connections with the society, so that our critical knowledge might be relevant and serve for some social transformation. We can also build alliances with various organizations outside of the university. But at the bottom line, how I see is that university, in that sense, is like an anchor institution, offering some possibilities, however it might be under pressure, however it might be challenging, and how in this kind of institutional spaces we can create more opportunities, like ephemera, like CMS InTouch, like Turkish Academy of Management CMS division, so we can push at least some ideas, but also not only for analyzing, I guess that was Devi's position there, not only analyzing the society, but also actively participating and creating social change with the means we have. And this brings us my third proposal, or third argument, in the sense of how we can keep these spaces and cracks within these institutions might be relevant. So in that sense, I see this tension between prefiguring and critical institutionalizing, because this is not a rose garden, right? That we all know that when you get into a kind of institution, when you become as an individual, as an academic, you are part of the performance systems, you are part of the metrics, you have to prove that you are valuable to the institution so that you can keep doing things that you want to do. In that sense, reference to Genevieve's work, that it is always an impure performativity, that we move in between this kind of prefigurative ideals where we try to do things, and meanwhile try to engage and transform the institutions that we are part of. So critically institutionalizing, if possible. Of course, it might be very bureaucratic. Of course, it might be very well established. But through the means we have, I still want to believe that, or at least, as a CMS community, going beyond the critique, that these are the spaces where we can push for this, democratic practices, participative practices, and how we can make them institutionalized in the sense of creating more fair and equal opportunities for our colleagues, for our PhD students, for the early career researchers, and also for ourselves. Because also we need to build alliances across universities, across departments, so that also we do not feel alone in this struggle. And this impure performative, in that sense, is all constant struggle. So I mean, this is, as critical scholars, of course, we are very much aware that we do not live on a kind of equal foot with various actors, and there are always different power imbalances. And this means that there will be always contestation. So nothing is fixed. However, it might sometimes count hegemonic. That doesn't mean that it is fully hegemonic or it's fully dominating. And there are always these kind of spaces where we can come together with colleagues, where we can keep the conversation going, and how we can practice these ideals. So in that sense, this is where the prefiguration comes. But yeah, again, it is always, I think we can begin with the assumption that it is constant struggle. Sometimes it is exhausting, sometimes it is tiring. But then when you see the initiatives are still there, for instance, as an affiliate member of Ephemera, I'm so proud that it is still there as a collective, as a horizontal kind of organizing by academics for academics. It is great to see this is there. And of course, I am aware of how even critical institutions can be oppressive, of course. But this is also where the constant struggle and constant constantation comes from. So we should not just, relax, or we are, of course, given the circumstances, that's not also even possible, but there's always this kind of movement, I would say. And within the spaces that we create, within the institutions that we are part of, within this possibilities we have, we can try breaking power imbalances as much as possible. We can for instance, even in teaching, even in our research, even also in our community roles, as much as possible. Yes, does it work all the time? No, but this doesn't mean that we give up. This doesn't mean that we leave the space for other forces or for oppressive forces. So we still go and we still teach about alternative organizations. We still teach about different ways of organizing. We still teach about the oppressive managerial regimes. And sometimes also we still teach about how bureaucracy sometimes can be helpful or sometimes oppressive. So, and also within these kind of sometimes the institutional roles that we have, and also the ideals may also conflict. And this is also part of the game, I would say, that we also try to, as an individual, for instance, I'm trying to also navigate these kind of pressures, that the direct democratic principles, but also do we have this space, or can we go there, or to what extent we can prefigure. So my point is, as a kind of summary, I would say we need to keep up fighting. And it's not easy. Of course, there are all these individual and societal challenges ahead of us. But through the spaces, through the possibilities, through the agency we have within the institutions, I think we just accept this impure performativity and work towards creating more spaces, work towards more critical institutionalizing for expanding the conversation, expanding the critical agenda, expanding the ways we can intervene into this established power relations. So that is my presentation, and I would love to, of course, have some questions on that, and would love to hear also other experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ozan. Now, Alex, it's your time.
Hello. Oh, it's disconcerting staring at myself. I've forgotten. It's been a while since I did an InTouch event last, so yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk. It's privileged to be among such a wonderful lineup of speakers. I'm not sure, to be honest, how much I can add to so many insightful points already raised, and there clearly overlaps as well between what my colleagues have already shared. I guess I'm probably going to speak a little bit more specifically to the CMS InTouch kind of dilemmas and histories and draw out of it. But as I said, this clearly overlaps. So we founded CMS InTouch, as Ozan already mentioned, in the height of the pandemic. It was Labor Day, 1st of May, 2020. And yes, and it was, you probably remember those days. We really needed connection, I guess, and hope, and yes, and kind of human touch, albeit virtually mediated. So we came together, and we were brought together by Patrizia Zanoni, who was at the time part of both organization and AOM CMS division leadership, and she brought together a group of us who were interested people in trying to do some online events for our community to keep us connected together. We probably had slightly different views on what it was about at the time and how long it would last. But I think, to myself personally, it was always really important that this transcends the pandemic, that it's not just about the pandemic, that it's kind of that this need to sustain our community remains. Because yes, we have these conferences, but not everyone can travel to conferences. They're expensive, they're behind paywalls. And yes, we have journals, but again, most of them, unlike the wonderful ephemera, are beyond paywalls, with all the problems that Devi also mentioned, So we wanted to build a different kind of community. And so I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges that have arisen. Again, as Elise say, it's hard to talk on behalf of a collective, but I'll guess some of these are my thoughts, but they're also rooted in many sort of conversations and discussions that we have had as part of CMS InTouch. So first of all, I think, so why organize CMS community differently? I think, first of all, it's a really important opportunity to test critical organizing principles and ideas, like Nick and Ozan already mentioned. I think it's actually, it's very easy to be critical. I think critique is super easy, actually. You just pick a problem and you say it's wrong. Doing things differently, it's a lot harder. Doing things differently is hard. Hope is hard. Working out how we do things differently and not create new problems is even harder still. So it is an opportunity and it's also a challenge. Doing things differently, try to organize ourselves differently, respond to this, put these ideas and theories in practice. So when we came together, we had several things that were important to us collectively. First of all, inclusivity was and still is absolutely paramount. We wanted to break down those barriers and paywalls. David's already mentioned some of the effects of paywalls. We wanted to bring people in from behind, those who are locked behind paywalls, who are locked out by all sorts of boundaries. We also had early discussions about leadership, and then from time to time we came back to this issue. Should someone take the lead in the collective? Should somebodies take the lead in the collective? Perhaps we should, it should be the career academics who should take the lead, or mid-career academics to help them develop their careers because it would be good for them. So we had all sorts of discussions, and each time we decided against ranks or people taking the leads. We wanted really to kind of to try to sustain this sort of non-hierarchical, collective democratic decision-making without the ranks and the leads. And it's been super hard. It's been absolutely worthwhile, I think. We're still struggling with this and we're still doing it despite the challenges, but it's been super hard because, and again, previous speakers have already mentioned, some Elise spoke to it, for example. There are, of course, advantages because, another thing we had is not just no links, no leads and no ranks, but it's also, we didn't really have minimum commitments, and anytime anyone needed breaks or sabbaticals, even extended for whatever reason, they could always have it. So the advantage, of course, I think we do absolutely have much more diversity of ideas and events and people as a result. Anyone can take anything forward, provided that they get enough support from other members, because this is a collective undertaking. You can't really run an event by yourself. Well, you could, but it would be really hard. But there are also challenges. So Elise mentioned or alluded to dilution of responsibilities and commitment. Some people take on more than others. There's, again, as Anne mentioned, care and self-exploitation. And certainly it's very easy within this sort of model to self-exploit. Et cetera, et cetera. We've had dormant periods as a result where, people just couldn't do and take on events. And we said, that's fine. We'll have dormant periods, but we'll do things when we can do things. We don't have to sustain kind of a mad pace all the time. We had, yes, and again, another one in terms of this dilution of responsibility, is it the CMS InTouch team's responsibility to constantly create ideas and events, or should we be more just kind of mainly responsive to what community comes to us? So is it the CMS community responsibility to effectively kind of help us create content? And it's a constant negotiation. We try to do both. So yes, there is that's kind of those sorts of dilemma, how proactive, how responsive. Another
both opportunity and challenge, or a set of opportunities and challenge is related to legitimacy and ambiguity. So CMS InTouch isn't formally an organization, right? Legally, we don't exist. We are kind of, in many ways, archetypically and ironically postmodern. We're kind of a cyborg assemblage of academic volunteers, video conferencing technology, CMS community members, institutional sponsors, event booking, technology, and orthodox ideas, conversation, and in a kind of rhizomatic style. Of course, this presents both opportunities and challenges. So it's great for transgressing boundaries, including people who are otherwise locked out. We have this, in many ways, we have this freewheeling ability to shape new topics and collaborations without institutional approval, being political when the institutionalized branches of CMS community are not permitted to speak out, not permitted to act out. We're kind of a phantom menace, for those of you who are Star Wars fans, able to resist from the shadows. But also, it creates real practical challenges. For example, we are not able to receive or spend funds because we don't legally exist, right? So we were kind of in between of things, but we can't, for example, crowdsource or crowd funds because, we don't exist, we can't receive funds, and we have to put ourselves through all sorts of hoops to be able even to receive support for Zoom, support for Eventbrite, from our sponsors. And of course, that leads to kind of a third issue, which is our interdependencies. So in our kind of cyborg network assemblage state, we're interdependent with others, which again has opportunities and challenges. But it also means we resist and break out of institutionalization, but also we are dependent still on our institutionalized sponsors. If it weren't for AOM, CMS division, and it weren't for the journal organization, both of which are very institutionalized, even though both are trying to do things differently. If it weren't for our team members being paid salaries by their institutions, and again, that links back to what Azan was talking about in terms of the status of universities and academia, we wouldn't be able to exist. We're kind of relying on, we're pushing our institutionalization to the margin so we can do kind of more freewheeling stuff in between. And the last and probably quite contentious issue I would like to raise is that of toxicity and friendly fire. Even when you want to do things differently in any community, even in a critical community, you can't escape problems, right? You can't you can't escape human problems. Often we kind of position ourselves in CMS, of course, in opposition to mainstream. This is an existential sort of positioning. We exist in relation to, we exist to oppose mainstream, we exist to critique it, we exist to try to do things differently from it. And often you kind of think, okay, we are under attack from the mainstream. But I think just as much we're often under attack from within the CMS community. I'm not talking here specifically about CMS InTouch. I'm talking about when you try to do things differently in CMS. So I think it's something that we should be very mindful about. Going back to the very first point where I started to say, it is very easy to critique. It is much harder to do things differently. And I think it would be great to find ways collectively to help and support each other and be encouraging and being mindful, as to be fair, most people do in most situations, that when you do try things differently, things will not be perfect, as Ozan was also saying. There will always be things that can be done better. We cannot do things perfectly, even when we try, because of all the constraints around us. But can we try to support each other genuinely when we do try to make things better? Can we be caring towards each other? Yeah, rather than bringing each other down. So I think that is really important. And I think it's a challenge to all of us. Let's not default immediately to critique. Okay, yes, working together on doing things better and then better and addressing problems is one thing. But I think there's a kind of various versions of critique, and I think often it's the toxic critique that comes to the fore because that's the easiest kind of critique. So I think in order to do things different collectively, we need more care, we need more support for each other, and we need more recognitions that things will break along the way and things will fall through the cracks. But it's still important to try and keep fighting, keep going, and keep reinventing ourselves. So I think I'll end on that point. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. But also, again, thank you to David, thank you to Nick and Elise and Ozan for your insight, for your words of hope, for your words of struggle, and knowing that we live in a very challenging period, both inside and outside academia. Now we have half an hour for an open discussion with the members of the panel, with the members in the audience. And so please feel free to ask questions to the panelists, to all of them, to each one in particular. Do it through the chat, or please, I think you can also use the microphone now if you want to speak. So please, if there is any question, this is the time.
There was one question which was posed, I think, during Devi's presentation. Maybe we can start with that and, give people time to think further questions. So I think the question, Devi, was about the alternative metaphysics. So do you have, this is how it's phrased, do you have any alternative metaphysics with which to envision an alternative? And I think this is kind of what I'm understanding from the comments is prompted by the idea that sabr as a word, is used within a particular discourse and has a particular metaphysics. So if you could, share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Sabra has resonance with various religious scriptures. In different religions, you'll find invocations of sabra. We're thinking about it as a socio-political process. So it's a process for us rather than a virtue or a trait that we're thinking about. And it's a politics that we're trying to think with and think through. In some way, again, to reiterate the fact that it's not a disposition. So we will find, so we have a paper that we're trying to put out in terms of a position paper, hopefully out in a couple of months, where we're kind of unpacking this idea a little more. We do already talk about it on the platform. But just to say that we're thinking about it more as a political process of sabra, the politics of patience, if you may, rather than as a disposition. I hope that helps. So it's not a metaphysical question that we're invoking. It's more of a dialectical process, if you may.
Okay. I think, I would say floor is open for everyone to kind of, pitch in with their questions. But I also wanted to check in with the panelists and see if you had any questions for each other. Was there anything that you wanted to, request the other panelists to elaborate, or any thoughts that you wanted to share as a reaction? Okay, we have a hand in the audience.
Yes, Daniel, go ahead.
I think we need to allow the audience to speak for them to be able to open the mic, if I'm not wrong. Let me try.
Okay.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add clarity to that question. What does it mean to be metaphysical? But anyways, let's leave that. I would add two comments over here. One is this, that I attended a CMS event a few months back as well. And I felt that, there's a lot of power dynamic over here as well. thank God that you guys have allowed me to talk. In the last event, I was not allowed to talk. And, I was feeling like, that novel of George Orwell was coming to my mind, 1984, in which a big brother is speaking. And all I have to do is listen. So I felt that, we are talking about alternatives, but we are ourselves organized in a very powerful way. There is a lot of power dynamic over here. But anyhow, so my question is this. So, post Descartes, the world changed. The world changed in the sense that, epistemology became first and metaphysics comes later. And if you read philosophical critique, not just operational critique, you realize that this is the problem, that epistemology is first and metaphysics comes later. So I felt after listening to all these esteemed scholars that, we are all talking about organizing. Organizing is a practical activity, and it is more of a practical thing. Before that, I think philosophically speaking, we need to have clarity on many things. What is our metaphysics? What are our aims? For example, my sister Alex Bristow, she was talking about toxic critique, but then she was also saying that she's a postmodernist as well. So if she's a postmodernist, there is no such thing as toxic critique because there is no agreed upon meaning of what you call toxic critique. Toxic is a very fluid term then. So my question is this: that do we realize that we are just focusing on organizing and process and being different? So do we have any concrete basis on which we can organize? So if you can comment on that, thank you.
I could take a shot at responding, if that's okay, and maybe others. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for your question, Daniel. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. For me, the question of metaphysics, where I situate myself is in the concrete. So that's where I am located philosophically. So that's one thing that I wanted to just quickly respond, that and organizing then is a very concrete response, which is building on that, right? Also to follow up that it's not located in an abstract kind of vision or idealism of the future. It's at least my own attempt to understand is based on communities and the people who are already organizing and responding to power structures, to oppressive power structures. So this is present around us, even as we can confront imperialism and fascist tendencies. There is resistance, and I think the attempt is to understand organizing there. So that's where I would locate it. In fact, I do in fact reject the idea of a metaphysical understanding in philosophy and locate it more in a materialist position. So just wanted to respond there. I see your position. I see that that's possibly your epistemic location. Just wanted to say that for me, there is another position, and that's where I'm locating organizing. If others wanted to join in and respond.
So if I may add something over here, if you allow. So if you read that book, The Message Becomes the Medium, you realize that structures are not neutral. And that is one of the problems which we have, because that's why this is one of the problems with CMS. My relationship with CMS is very complicated because when I started, reading about CMS, I was really in love with it. But within 6 months, I was like, it was back like 7, 8 years ago. I was like, CMS is very contradictory itself as well, because if you read the stalwarts of CMS, you realize that they borrow a lot from philosophical, what you call, write-ups. And there's a lot of critique of modernity over there. They primarily bank on that. And modernity, if you understand philosophically, is basically the changing of the philosophical framework that is, shifting from metaphysics to epistemology. That is the problem. And that's my question, why we're not addressing that? Because if we are not addressing the problem, we will keep repeating the problem. Because, there are voices within CMS community that CMS itself has become institutionalized. For example, if you read Wilmot Hugh, he himself admits that institutionalization is bad, but then again, he also says that it is good that CMS has become institutionalized as well. So for me, I see it as a contradiction that on one hand, you're saying that, this is a problem, and then on the other hand, you're saying that, we have become like that. So how do I understand that?
Maybe I can reflect on the institutionalization argument. I guess I understand also. I just want to echo what David said in the sense of I'm also looking into more the material, concrete, actual reasons and in which way we can challenge these material ways of organizing differently. And that's why we begin with this kind of institutions. So these are modern institutions. Of course, university is one of the best example. However, it dates so so early. I guess the challenge here is not really looking into the CMS itself, what it means, what kind of values. Of course, there are some values. Of course, there are some assumptions. But I guess at least where I stand is how we can translate these values into practical organizing ways so that we can create change. And of course, this might be overambitious. And again, I'm not saying that we are doing the revolution right here, right now, or for tomorrow. It's more about with some small incremental steps within the spaces we have, within the agencies we have, what we can create. And then we see whether this will be fruitful or not. Sometimes we success, sometimes we fail, and that's perfectly fine. I guess we should just begin with this kind of assumption, and we should just begin with this kind of understanding the material conditions where we are in, material conditions of how the universities are funded, material conditions how we are, or the academics are now quite oppressed or squeezed, or losing the space where actually we do the basic stuff. So given the circumstances, are we just going to discuss what CMS refers to or what kind of luggage it has? Or are we going to look to future and within the capacity we have, what are we going to do? Of course, we can discuss about the metaphysics, and this is a very fair argument. But again, I do not also see myself on the metaphysics part. I am more in the material conditions, understanding material conditions and also transforming material conditions as much as possible. And given the circumstances, I am a knowledge worker, and within the capacity I have as a knowledge worker, what I can do. I can organize through CMS InTouch. I can organize through ephemera. I can organize through PSI. I can organize through my students. Yeah, there are all these kind of possibilities we have within the institutions. Does it mean that I accept fully the institution itself? No, but this is the space where I can do some stuff. So that is kind of my argument. That's why I say that we should just sit back and let the space appropriated by others. No, we need to occupy spaces. We need to put our arguments and our practices there so we can organize differently. If the neoclassical economics is taught, why don't we teach about community economies? If managerial orthodoxy is presented as the ultimate problem solver, why don't we address the communities as problem solvers? I think this should be our role, and this is very material. This is very real, and this is, I guess, the main part of practical organizing as critical scholars. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ozan. And I think that leads us very powerfully into actually a comment from Scott, which I'll just kind of, read out. And because the request here is, what Scott says is that, the challenge can sometimes be reminding ourselves in some ways how relatively well we do, what we do. If we attend, other events or experience other spaces. And I think all of us who are here can attest to that. I mean, the way I got involved in this community was also, the word which has echoed very strongly, kindness and care. And that's how, I became a part of this community as well. So the request from Scott is to each of our panelists to actually point out something practical or conceptual that provides you a sense of hope, however small or however tentative. So perhaps we could just go around the virtual room, starting with Nick.
Thanks, Divya. Thanks, Scott, for your question. I think it's a nice one that asks us to reflect on, what we do well and what we would like to see more of in academia. Now, usually, if I'm asked that question, I often point to ephemera, but I can't do that today because I've already been pointing at ephemera the whole time. So let me kind of point elsewhere. I think often I'm struck by the incongruity of people like us, let's say, broadly speaking, interested in critical social theory, sociology, cultural studies, critical communication studies, and so on. People like us working in the context of a business school. So I've been working in a business school for 20 years now, since when I did my PhD, but my background's in a different discipline in social and political thought. And so but I still feel like an outsider in the business school. And it strikes me as both hilarious, but also hopeful that I'm allowed to have a job and progress within this institution that should otherwise not be very friendly towards the kind of work that I'm interested in and the kind of perspectives that I take. So I'm supervising a couple of PhD students at the moment, one of whom is working on worker cooperatives in within kind of post-growth imaginaries. Another one is working on issues around anti-blackness in organizations. The fact that both of these junior scholars are working within a business school strikes me as the height of optimism. So that's my answer.
Wonderful. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I will wait. I already talked too much.
Okay, so Alex.
Okay, sure. Well, I think that's a really nice question. Thanks for that, Scott. And I think there's lots of positive, there's lots of things we do well. I will shine the spotlight again on CMS InTouch with the excuse that it is a fifth anniversary celebration. And hopefully we can say a bit more about it. We have by now organized more than 60 events, despite all the challenges. And I think that's an incredible achievement of academic volunteers working through the pandemic and then beyond, and of the community who have come together and, put forward ideas and acted as panelists and acted as team members and acted as, participants of these events. So I think it is hard to do things differently, but it's not impossible. And, and I think the whole panel today giving examples of many wonderful things that do take place. And I think hopefully they give people hope that we can do things differently. It is possible. And yes, and I almost want to put my fellow CMS InTouch colleagues who are here today on the spot. Divya already mentioned her own example, but I also wonder whether Marco and Munib behind the scenes and Vic as well can also say something hopeful.
Yeah, something hopeful. I think I can relate really a lot with Scott's point about how bad we are reminding ourselves that despite all the challenges, we try to do our best in keeping this community as diverse and global as it is together, and finding spaces to have conversation, finding spaces to disagree. And I think that my hope is that we might learn to accept that we are a diverse community, and accepting this diversity and even these divisions as a resource for thinking differently about the things that we want to do. Because my main concern in these last few months, probably even years, is how these divisions are creeping amongst us. And as Alex was saying in her intervention, the fact that this is creating division inside a community that doesn't need to be, I'm not talking about having a community that is always agreeing on everything that we do and we say or we think about the way we see the world. We might have a different perspective, but I think that the important thing is that we understand that these divisions between us will make only the hegemonic power stronger. And I think that we hopefully transform and appreciate this division and use them as a resource and a source of energy to think and do things differently for the future. We might make mistakes. It's definitely is always the case, but it's better to. I know it's probably doing something that is a bit of a cliche, but it's only when we do mistake in trying that we can really create something and do something. And I know it's going to be challenging, but it's the only thing that we can do. And we hope that this space, CMS InTouch, continues to develop, and that we can have a 10-year anniversary, a 15, a 20-year anniversary in the future. So yeah, this is my hope for the future. Thank you. Now,
Jump in. Just wanted to say, I think there's different ways we can push boundaries within academia as well. And like I don't know, I had this conversation with scholars that are really into trying to push differently type of literature. And we were having this conversation about the fact that It can also be through bringing specific topics or theorizing in more mainstream conversation, but it could also be outside academia, like supporting forms of activism, speaking in libraries, or like putting your academic skills to support projects of others. Like this is some of the stuff that I've been doing personally. Within academia, I think something that I find really hopeful is the solidarity networks that I've been able to have in my case, like in a very, going back to what Ozan and Debbie was saying, in a really material way, people supporting me with funding, people supporting me with like buying lunch for me, this kind of stuff when I was a PhD student. And today as an assistant prof, stuff that I'm also doing for PhD students. And I think this gives me a lot of hope, because it does feel that to some extent we're managing to do this gifting network, or even if it's really local and with a really small bunch of people. Yeah, I mean, trying to support one another, to help people find positions, to have more stable way of living feels like something reassuring to some extent in a really difficult context. So this would be my really small point.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elise. Vic and Munib, would you like to share your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I'll jump in quickly. So thank you for all being here today and supporting this event. And I was just pondering Danielle's point about events that allow talking, and so I know some of you on the call will know that I anchor a monthly event that kind of doesn't allow talking, which is our CMS InTouch rights session. But that has been really growing as a little community of scholars who come together to be quiet together, but to have small conversations with one another, to be in each other's presence together, in a supportive way to work on our work. And I think that has felt like something that has certainly helped my practice and hopefully has helped others. But I do take inspiration from Danielle's point that, and I guess again as part of today, we want to hear from the community about other things that could happen that would help to provide a sense of hope for all of us. I'm loving the idea of a potentially some sort of discussion around the metaphysics, which certainly beyond my bare of little brain, but certainly hearing Danielle talking, I think that it sounds like it could be really inspiring to bring that to the fore. So we do practical things. We try to take action. We try and be active, as Elise was talking about. There's an activism side to this, but we are certainly not putting ourselves forward as being the only people and the only way. And if anything, I think the hope in this community is its openness and listening to hear, not necessarily listening to always do, but listening to understand, and take things forward as a space just to be with one another. So yeah, that would be my thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Vic already said, I also wanted to address that because I thought that is more relevant question in terms of that this is a CMS InTouch event and we are running this, and there's a question on power difference. There are two things which I wanted to mention. One is that we really have a very small team, so it gets difficult to manage. But more important reason being that sometimes our events also get hacked, so we have to somehow use technology to provide lesser agency to a lot of people, because we do not check whoever is registering and are they genuine people, or sometimes there are trolls out there. So that was the practical question, answer to that question. In terms of where do you see hope? I don't really know. It's a very difficult, deep question. I don't know about that. But what I have realized in sort of my engagement is to look at others when they are not prioritizing, quote unquote, the values that are privileged in our careers, visibility, publishing, networking, etc. Whenever I see other people not doing things for that, that gives me hope. And whenever I try doing that, I think that gives me hope. And I think CMS InTouch, my engagement with CMS InTouch is out of that sense of doing something without necessarily thinking about the returns, the kind of mentality that is drilled down into our heads all around us. And I would also take this opportunity to extend invitation to people to join our community to help us do this more. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm conscious of time, but there is a very interesting question about, the fact that we are doing this volunteering and what is the message that gives to the university. So I do not know if my last two panelists, Devi and Ozan, if you want to also respond to that question while answering. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Doesn't matter. Devi, over to you.
You were only muted for the very last second, so no worries. Message arrived.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for that question. I think hope is a tricky question for me because I do think we're living in quite bad times, and I'm not going to be, kind of. I don't want it to be, looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. It's there are fascist regimes. There are communities that are targeted. Our cities are increasingly unlivable. In India, in particular, Delhi, Bombay, you name the big metropolitan cities, they're unlivable in every respect, right? In terms of infrastructure, core infrastructure, staple infrastructures that sustain life, and we're looking at war on an ongoing basis. So I don't think there is. I think that seeking easy hope, or maybe kind of facile, if I may just use that term. But I do believe in revolutionary hope. But I also think that, and I'm going to build on something that you've mentioned in the comment, which is maybe not look in academic spaces, because I do think many of our spaces are compromised. But I'd say if we look beyond these spaces, at spaces where people are working, people are resisting. And if we are part of these communities, then I think it keeps us going, because, those who really have struggled to meet their everyday bread, find shelter, and yet they show up, they extend enormous amount of humanity, they make documentaries under military coups, they resist, so then it behoves us to keep going. So I would just want to reiterate that I think sometimes there's an urge to seek easy hope. And especially in org studies, I find that we love to end our papers on, but there was resistance, and but there is hope. So I would just kind of caution there, for me personally at least, that I find myself cautioning myself there in seeking these spaces of how are people surviving in these spaces, and really just would just like to leave it there. Thank you, Divya. But again, just to maybe just answer that question on universities as well. Yeah, for sure. But again, to thrive thrive despite these spaces, right? Going back to what Munib said, that it's those interstices that we still have to find and kind of build. So over to Ozan. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. I actually agree what has been already said. I mean, if I need to address one or point out some, hope, however it may sound, I see hope with the students actually, that I of course I need to begin with that how privileged I am in the sense of functioning in a global North university with some resources, and then we could create a master's program, particularly teaching about alternatives, particularly teaching about how to transform society by organizing. And this gives me hope. This is the space where this institution, however it is not perfect, however it is sometimes aligned with the, for instance, not accept BDS or not, make open political statements. This is where I am. And within this kind of space, that there's this master's program that very motivated students internationally coming and discussing about how can we build a post-capitalist world? And not just at the theoretical level, but also at the practical level, thanks to also our collaborators, as Debbie mentioned, that there are those grassroots organizations, however under pressure, however they do not have enough funding, however they do not have enough human resource, they believe in the cause. They believe in the cause that we can collaborate, we can do something, and we can actually break down this hypothetical walls between the university and the practice, or between the theory and practice of social change. So this gives me hope, and this is not easy, that you need to bring all these partners together. You need to tell them there are these very motivated students who want to understand how you organize change, how you create impact at the local level, about undocumented migrants, about providing food, about building a cooperative, about transforming economy. So then this is the space. This is our space. This is our space where we can really be part of these struggles and contribute their struggles, and we can learn from them, and we can also support them. And this gives me hope. Not an easy hope, very difficult one, given the circumstances, but still, there is still hope. Yeah, and I guess there was also the answer by Melika, right? Yeah, very quickly. Then I think right now, if we produce some knowledge, I would believe that this is not about universities at all. I guess if we produce some kind of knowledge, it is for our community, it is for our CMS group or critical colleagues within the business schools, sharing. I would argue it's a way of commoning, also relying on YouTube that we share this widely. So paradoxes, contradictions, here we are, and still pushing for a kind of alternative idea, at least out there, and it's up to university what to do with this. But at least for us, it is very clear that it is part of organizing, it is part of being together, it is part of solidarity, it is part of communing knowledge. So that's at least my take when we think about these initiatives. And I think we need these spaces, we need this CMS InTouch, we need this small reading groups, we need ephemera, we need PSI, and without us, these places will not be there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ozan. And I think just picking up on that community point that, and echoing what Vic has said, that we do this for each other and together with each other, I'll hand it over to Marco to invite everyone to join the community in the last few slides and to bring us to a close.
Yes, thank you very much thank you very much for your words and for the inspiring words that you've been, saying until now. I mean, it's been very energizing, to be in these times of like a bit of pessimism. It's been like looming around us. So thank you again. So like I ask you to have like a couple of minutes of patience, because I want to share a couple of interesting things and information before we go. So I need to go quick to the last slide, if I can move them. Okay. So forthcoming events. So the CMS InTouch space is still active. We have activities planned for Tuesday, 10 February and Tuesday, 17th of March for the InTouch writing sessions. You can find here the QR codes that you can just use to register to one of these two events to participate with in one of these sessions organized by Vic. Thank you very much for doing this and for keeping the community thriving. Then we also wanted to renew the call for contribution from the people here with us, and also the people who will be listening to this recording on YouTube. So we still and we continuously wait for ideas for organizing webinar and standalone events. From in these last 5 years of activity of CMS InTouch, we had lots of different seminars on violence, post-pandemic societies and education, careers, governance, feminist theory, anti-racism, democracy, patriarchy, communication, immigration, disability and academic praxis, and so on. This is just a few examples, but we are very open to any ideas. So please get in touch with us if you have any idea for organizing an event. A standalone event, but also one of the workshop series that we have at our disposal is the publishing critical work. We've been like so many of these, but we are still running these events. We are open to have any proposal for these kind of events. Then we have special calls if you are part of a special issue or a call for chapters. Please get in touch, and we are very happy to organize these events with you. Then we have the sessions, the webinars, the workshop series in inspiring methods. Again, if you have any idea, please get in touch with us. Send us a message to cmswebinars@gmail.com or also through CMS InTouch. And then the Hot of the Press, if you have any forthcoming or published book or edited book, please get in touch and we will be more than happy to provide a platform to share the book, to share the contents. And yeah, this is amazing. But we're also opening up calls for a new webinar workshop series, which we decided to call CMS InTouch Global Connections. So considering the conversation that we've been having today about the CMS community as a global space, we would like to invite ideas for events that will give a platform for local international CMS groups to speak with the rest of the CMS community all around the world about their research and their activity, share the local perspective on critical management studies, issues, and the aim is to highlight diverse perspective and strengthen connection, just to avoid having these events organized always from the global north, which, because unfortunately this is what happens most commonly. And then the last point in connection to what Moni was just saying, we are a small team. We are a small team in transition. So please, we will be more than happy to have new members joining the team. We will be sharing a call very soon for a kind of formalized application process. Keep an eye on our spaces. We'll probably be circulating this through Gmail and the communities over there, but also through Eventbrite. And yeah, this is all. Thank you very much. Let me stop sharing if I can make it. So thank you very much, everyone who joined us. Thank you very much to all the speakers for accepting our invitation. Thank you very much for your time, your energy, your words. It's been great to have all of you, and I'm very happy that we managed to have this event to celebrate CMS InTouch, but also the other initiatives that makes this space a little bit more hopeful, hopefully. So thank you very much again. Yeah, we can applaud to ourselves.